It's 6 o'clock, so we'll get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's public hearing. My name is John Urino. I'm the zoning examiner for the city of Tucson. I conduct rezoning hearings and special exception hearings on behalf of the mayor and council and make findings of fact, which I put into a written report along with my recommendation, which I then send along to the mayor and council for their consideration and for their final decision. My report will be based on the information submitted to me, which includes the rezoning application, the staff report, all written approvals and protests, all correspondence, and the testimony given at tonight's public hearing. I will also include in the record all documents submitted to me up to the close of the public hearing. Tonight's proceedings are being recorded. If requested, a transcript can be prepared. With that in mind, if I call on you to testify, I would ask you please try to speak clearly and begin your testimony by stating your name and your address. The process goes like this. First, I complete a preliminary report within 5 working days after the close of the public hearing. Then I prepare a final report. The final report will be issued 2 weeks after the close of the public hearing. For those of you who wish to receive a copy of the preliminary report and are not a listed party on the case, please send an email to tucsonrezoning@tucsonaz.gov. Again, tucsonrezoning@tucsonaz.gov, or call the Planning and Development Services Department. A copy of the final report will be available from the Planning and Development Services Department, and I send the final report to the mayor and council. At the scheduled public hearing on the case, the mayor and council will then vote on the matter based on my recommendation along with other factors. We have 2 cases tonight. The first case is the original hearing on the matter, and that is case TP-ENT 0424-00011, Catalina and Second LLC, Catalina Ave, R1 to R2. With respect to that case, I will open the public hearing and ask Mr. Gabriel Slater of the Planning and Development Services Department to give a brief presentation of the case. After his presentation, I will ask the applicant to make his or her presentation. I will then ask to hear from anyone in the audience who wishes to speak. We did have a request from someone to speak, and everyone is welcome to speak. But so I will call on the person who sent in a written request to speak first, and then proceed to hear others who wish to speak. I would ask that you please wait for me to call on you to testify so we will have a clear record of each person that's speaking. Since I cannot have any communication with anyone involved in these cases outside of the public hearing, I would invite you to speak tonight if you would like to do so. After everyone in attendance has had an opportunity to speak, I will offer the applicant the chance to respond to any of the concerns or issues that were brought up. With that in mind, Mr. Slater, would you please present the staff report? Excuse me, let me just also say, if you're not speaking, please mute your devices. We get a lot of feedback sometimes if people have their lines open when they're not speaking. Mr. Slater?
Sure. So this is the Catalina Ave LLC rezoning from R1 to R2, case number TP-ENT 0424-00011. It's a request by the WLB group to rezone 2 residential parcels on North Catalina Ave from R1 to R2. It's requested as the owner wishes to split the 2 parcels into 4 with 1 dwelling unit per parcel. The current R1 zoning has a minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet, and the subject parcels cannot be split while maintaining that minimum size. Plan Tucson and the city's housing affordability strategy support the request. No physical changes are proposed, and the rezoning allows the resulting parcels to be sold individually, and it's not going to create any major changes to the existing neighborhood. The Albert on Broadway area plan also indicates the subject parcels are appropriate to be considered for medium density residential use. So the area plan supports the rezoning from R1 to R2. Again, there's no changes proposed. All 4 homes already have their own discrete utility connections and access to the right-of-way. The lot splits will result in 4 lots of approximately 6,000 square feet each. That's consistent with the other nearby lots in Catalina Ave. So the density of the neighborhood measured in residents per acre is not going to change. As a condition of the rezoning, a land split in substantial compliance with the preliminary development plan must be submitted and approved. And so in the future, if somebody were to want to recombine the parcels into larger R2 parcels, they would that would require a modification of zoning conditions with the required public input, hearing before the zoning examiner, and another meeting before the mayor and council. So because they have to split it to make the rezoning happen, they can't just get the rezoning and turn around and build an apartment building. Subject to compliance with this and other preliminary conditions, the approval of the rezoning request is appropriate. And we received 2 emails opposed to the rezoning and 2 emails requesting to speak at this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Slater. Would the applicant like to be heard?
Yes, I would. Would I be able to share my screen?
Yes, you may.
Good evening. My name is Liz Matson from the WLB Group, and I am representing this rezoning request this evening. I am joined by Rob Longacre, also from the WLB Group, and the property owner, Brad Gephardt. Thank you for your time this evening to consider a rezoning request, and we look forward to your recommendation. Also, thank you to city staff, especially Gabriel Slater, for the work that was done bringing this case before you this evening. As mentioned, we are requesting a rezoning from R1 to R2. The nature of this rezoning is not to allow for new development, but to allow the property owner to divide his parcels into 4 parcels through a land split application. By rezoning to R2, the property owner would be able to split the parcels and give him the flexibility to sell each home individually. The plan shown on the screen is just showing built conditions on the site as no new development is proposed. The 2 existing properties are 12,000 square feet with 2 homes on each. The proposed land split will divide each parcel approximately in half along the existing fence line and result in parcels roughly 5,500 to 6,500 square feet. The existing structures will meet R2 dimensional standards as is, and the access will remain in the same place on the gravel driveways. Additionally, the proposed parcel sizes are consistent with surrounding single-family parcels in the adjacent R2 zoning, as well as some of the surrounding R1 zoning that have legal non-conforming lot sizes. The proposed rezoning is compliant with Plan Tucson and the Albion-Broadway area plan. And we did hold a neighborhood meeting on April 17th at Himmel Park Library. The only attendee was a staff member from the Ward 6 office. And we did receive 3 phone calls from adjacent property owners who were curious about the rezoning, but they voiced no objections at the time of our conversations. Today, we did receive the 2 email protests with concerns about negative impacts and the possibility of higher density. In response to these concerns, we would just like to reiterate that we are not proposing new development as part of this rezoning. The properties will continue to operate as single-family residences, and the owner maintains them and keeps them clean and attractive. While R2 code does allow for higher density than R1, the size of the 4 proposed lots doesn't allow for multifamily development based on R2 UDC dimensional standards. And although 1 additional unit may be permitted through the city's accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And now I would like to turn it over to Mr. Gephardt to say a couple of things about his property.
Thank you, Ms. Madsen. Mr. Gephardt, please go ahead and start with your name and your address, sir. Mr. Gephardt, you may proceed if you would start with your name and address, sir. Thank you.
Yes, hi. This is Brad Gephardt, and my wife Lisa and I own the subject parcels. Our address is 5151 East Broadway, Suite 1600, Tucson, Arizona 85711. I purchased the property in 1980 and have managed the property as 4 individual one-bedroom rental homes for the last 44 years. We intend to continue owning and managing the property into the foreseeable future. We are requesting the rezoning to R2 so that each home can be sold individually. We do not intend to change the use of the property or sell the homes at this time. However, for retirement and estate planning purposes, the ability to sell one home at a time would be very helpful. In 2005 and 2006, we remodeled and updated 2 of the homes and have updated them again a few years ago. Last year, we remodeled and updated a 3rd home and replaced the roof and AC system on the 4th home. And we have recently replaced windows and are in the process of refinishing the exterior over the next month or 2 of that 4th home. These improvements enhance the look of the neighborhood and help us to improve the rents, which will be helpful for retirement. We appreciate the thoughtful direction and assistance that Rob, Liz, and the WLB group has provided, as well as the staff's work in reviewing the rezoning proposal and their conclusion that approval of the requested rezoning is appropriate. We also appreciate your time, Mr. Examiner, and consideration of our proposal on behalf of the City of Tucson. I would like to thank you for holding this hearing. Thank you for listening, and now here's Liz to wrap it up.
Just wanted to finish off by saying we have read the staff report and agree with its findings. We are also in agreement with the proposed conditions of approval. And thank you for your time and consideration of our request this evening, and we're available for questions.
Thank you very much, Liz and Brad Gephardt. I don't have any questions at the present time. Would anyone in the audience like to be heard on this case?
Yes, please. And if my name is Giselle, and if I can request to make comments first, since I'm at work and I don't have a
Yes.
lot of time.
Please go ahead. Yes, start with your
Okay.
name and your address, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Giselle Mondu. My address is 1025 North Catalina Avenue. So I'm across the street west of the properties in question. I want to oppose the proposed zoning change. And I understand the arguments that, you know, the lot size is going to stay consistent. There's no intentions for future development at this time, but I think that we cannot guarantee that any new owners wouldn't add an accessory dwelling unit to each property. And that's my main concern. It's just high traffic, way too dense already. We have a huge assisted living facility just around the corner. Catalina and Jerry Avenue are the only streets that you can get into this neighborhood from Speedway. So there's already a lot of cross traffic on Catalina Avenue. Because of the assisted living, because there's really no other streets to get into the neighborhood. There's also micro imports just down the street, adds a lot of traffic. They test drive their cars up and down Catalina. And then now we have a coffee/bike shop, which has made it 10 times, 100 times more traffic and dense. So my main concerns, even though there's no intentions to build and that the future development isn't part of this plan, and even though there may be other steps and rezoning that future owners would have to take, there's still that potential. So we're just opening the door here. And if property owner wants to sell the property, nothing is preventing them from doing that currently. So there is no negative impact to the property owner, but to the owner occupants that live on the street only. And I think that's the biggest point I want to make, is that even though property owner has owned the property for many, many years and has done a good job of upkeeping the neighborhood, they don't live there. And so selling them, providing another opportunity for the new owner to build, opens the door for higher density, more traffic, and the negative impacts will be felt on the property owners that live there. So I understand that there are other R2 lots on that street, but those are owner occupied lots. And that's the difference. So I think that's really all I want to say, besides, you know, that the Airbnbs that have come in and taken over these ADUs and are currently existing in one of the homes now, I'm not certain, but they're short-term rentals that are really high impact on the neighborhood. So to have more opportunity for that to happen is just really negative for the owners that live there. Also, it just lowers our property values so much more. So property owner now of the two properties in question would sell their property, reap the benefits, which they can already do now. Nothing's preventing them, but our property values would lower if they do intend to build an accessory dwelling unit, and nothing would stop them. So that's all I want to say. And thank you so much for letting me go first. I have to get back to work.
Well, thank you for participating tonight, Ms. Montu.
Thank you. Everyone take care.
You too. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this case? I'll say one more time. If anyone else in the audience
Yes.
would like, go right ahead.
Yes.
Please start with your name and address.
Oh, actually, I'll let the other person go first.
Okay,
I heard somebody else chime in.
go ahead.
Hi, my name is Timothy Spence. I own 1031 North Catalina Avenue. I'm actually neighbors with Giselle, who just spoke. I also oppose this idea. I may not be as educated as she is on the topic, but I can attest to how obnoxious the traffic has gotten on that street as is. If there was anything that I would be for, it would be to limit and reduce the traffic flow to Catalina Avenue. In the 10 years I've lived there, I'm 100% shocked no one's been killed. No dogs have been run over. There's no respect from some of the surrounding businesses. The Speedway, you know, it's like an artery from Speedway to Fifth or wherever else they want to go to avoid the red lights there. The neighborhood has a lot of charm to it, and that charm comes from the historic values of those homes and the homeowners. Anytime, in my experience, you've seen a neighborhood that becomes, you know, offset by the number of rentals to homeowners, you tend to see high 911 areas. The only time I've ever had problems in that neighborhood with the police or any sort of criminal activities, it's always been at a rental. One of them was right across the street from my house, and that was multiple times. In my opinion, the high traffic and the crime and lower income that comes with all of that reduces the quality of life of all the people that are living there, that own a home there, that also too one day would like to retire, that also too would like to have some value in their property, and take pride in their property and where they live. And you know, they're more vigilant over their place. You know, you build a camaraderie with those who live there and own their house because there's just more invested. So I definitely oppose this wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Mr. Spence, for your participation. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard? Perhaps the woman who gave Mr. Spence the floor?
Yes, my name is Caroline Hanson. I'm actually Mr. Spence's sister, and I live with my brother at 1031 North Catalina Avenue, and I own a home in the neighborhood that my son lives in. And our sister owns a home in this neighborhood as well. And I've actually I was the president of the homeowners association last year. None of the neighbors want this to take place. Exactly what Giselle said is true. There is no guarantee of no future development happening there's no reason to turn those lots into R2. It just opens it up for higher density in an area that, as you've already heard, is quite dense. And I, for one, walk my dog every day in this neighborhood and have to be on constant alert for the traffic. And we have some rentals that are in the area. And I will say that those are the properties that typically have the garbage out front, the parties, the racers. We just don't need that in this little pocket. We already have enough to deal with. We are working on getting some speed humps installed. And the last thing we need are more rentals or the potential of more rentals. And if you change zoning as a real estate agent, I know you change the zoning to R2 and you will attract developers. So even if Mr. Gephardt doesn't plan on building, which I personally, I've heard through the grapevine from some other neighbors that that is not true, that they are planning to build some more houses on the lots, but obviously that's just hearsay. But even if that current owner doesn't plan to build, somebody that buys that in the future will build. And we want to preserve the residential field, what little of it we have left, we want to preserve and hold that sacred at the space, make it more safe for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this case? Ms. Madsen, would you like to respond to any of the issues that have been raised?
Yes. I just want to say that the property owner, most of it was in reference to the property owner's intentions, and his intentions are to retain the property, and we can't guarantee what happens once he sells them, but I do know that he intends to be a good neighbor and continue to be a good neighbor as he has been. And if Brad, if you'd like to add anything.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with this unmute button.
No problem.
But there's several things. First of all, adding an additional unit to the property makes no sense for me to do. We're getting decent rents from the single family homes that we have there now. And if we added another unit, we would have to reduce those rents on those units. And we might get additional rent from that extra unit, but we'd have to finance it. And so it would make no sense financially. And it probably won't make sense for anybody in the near future for the same kind of reason. So I wouldn't worry about adding density to that neighborhood on these parcels. Someday, maybe 25, 30 years from now, maybe it'll make sense. Maybe the zoning will change again. Who knows? But we have to deal with it as it is now. And we're concerned about, we're getting up in the years, and we want to be able to leave our children something that they can use and rent or sell, however they want to do it. But we want to give them the most liquidity and options. We're not planning to sell. The only reason we would is if something happened to one of us that we had to for financial reasons. But we just intend right now, our intent is to own all 4 houses for the rest of our lives and just produce income for rent. We're not going to add an additional unit, and whoever spread that rumor around was just making it up out of thin air, because I never told anyone that I would ever be interested in adding additional units. Also, we're not subject to an HOA, so she's not president of our properties because we don't pay dues. We've never been assessed by an HOA. I've owned it for 44 years. I've never talked to anybody from an HOA. So there is no HOA as far as I know.
I did not say HOA.
Yeah. You did say HOA.
Excuse me.
Sorry, but you said you were
excuse me, both
president
of
of
you.
the HOA.
Excuse
Sorry,
me.
neighborhood association.
Excuse me, please. The intent of the hearing is not to debate one another. It's to present evidence. And I hear what each of you is saying, so respectfully, Mr. Gephardt, if you have anything else you'd like to say, please do so.
I think that's it. I just want to put the point across. We're not planning to sell or build. We just need the ability for estate planning purposes and retirement purposes to have the flexibility to sell each home on its own. And there's plenty of R2 property surrounding all sides. There's commercial property on one side. So that high density assisted living property is adjacent to all of my properties. And I've never had a traffic problem from that. In fact, most people don't even drive. They're too old. So I don't see that there's a huge traffic issue now. Like she said, I don't live there, but we spend a lot of time there and we spent a lot of money. So whoever's talking about us not being invested in the area is speaking out of turn because we just have spent tens of thousands of dollars on each of those houses, fixing them up. So I think that's it, unless my wife wants to add anything.
The traffic there is.
No. My wife has spent a lot of time down there. She does the landscape cleanup and she's never noticed any serious traffic problem in that name. And she thinks the coffee place is only open on weekends. So, and I've never seen, a whole bunch of cars there either. So I don't quite understand that. Seems like it might be an exaggeration, but I guess that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gephardt and
You're welcome.
Liz Gephardt. I'm closing the public hearing on case TPENT 0424-00011 Catalina and Second LLC Catalina Ave R1 to R2. We'll next turn to case TPENT 0124-00002 Desert Bloom Dispensary, East Speedway Boulevard. Now, as I indicated at the beginning, this is a continued hearing from the case that was first heard on May 16, 2024. And given that this was a continued hearing, it's going to proceed a little differently than the hearing we just had. It'll proceed in this fashion. I continued the hearing because the applicant had technical issues and was unable to join the meeting and participate in the meeting. Others did not have technical difficulties, and we had a rather full discussion of the issues. So what I'm going to do in this case is open the continued hearing and then ask the applicant, Mr. Ari Rubin, to give whatever presentation or whatever remarks he would like to give, and then I will open it up to others to speak. I would ask, given that we did have a full hearing, except for Mr. Rubin's presentation, that if we can, I'm not going to cut anybody off, it's just not what I do, all right? So if we can, if you participated in the prior hearing, if you have something new to say, please, I invite you to do so. If you want to just repeat a little bit of what you said before, please, I invite you to do so. I take careful notes. Everyone has available to them the YouTube or Zoom, I guess, video of the thing. So and look, again, I'm not saying don't speak. I want people to participate as fully as they want to, but bear in mind that I already have access to what has gone on before. So with those very brief remarks, Mr. Rubin, would you like to present the case for your application?
Thank you. I want to say that I have with me today Vince Catalano, the architect for the project, and Philip Baca is the project manager working for me. This is our first time in a special exemption process. We were very familiar with the zoning process for marijuana facilities and establishments going back to 2012 and 2013. We had a prior planning and zoning approval of this site issued in 2021. And the site, I have to wear multiple hats when thinking about it. I'm a minority owner in the property. My grandfather and Gus Fatinas purchased the property many, many years ago, and the families still own their respective halves. My co-manager is Ted Fatinas, who I believe submitted a letter of support of the project. And I've spoken with Father Robert from across the street at the operating church. That church we're well aware of because we would have considered using the site for prior lottery processes through the state of Arizona in their heavily regulated medical marijuana program and then later recreational marijuana program. We currently operate under the corporate name Medmar Tanque Verde LLC, Desert Bloom Relief Center on 22nd Street in Tucson, which will celebrate its 11th year anniversary a week from now, which we're very proud of. And so we've grown very familiar with this medical marijuana heavily regulated industry. And I believe a lot of the concerns that have been addressed by neighbors that they were addressed by regulations and the voters and the people that drafted the ordinance quite some time ago. For that reason, Tucson has largely left that regulation alone and not added anything to it and focused solely on zoning and where these properties would go. And at some point several years ago, the setbacks were reconsidered, what types of business we were required to be set back from. And in that process, I believe mayor and council voted to eliminate churches as one of the named uses, which then made this property viable again. So at that point, we obtained local zoning approval that was good for 1 year. And we continued operations in our lease space over on 22nd Street. All of these retail locations and cultivation locations, which we also operate in the city of Tucson, are required to have policies of preventing loitering and to have surveillance systems and a series of alarms and cameras, panic buttons, and other systems which prevent diversion or theft of marijuana in any regard. And we take those policies seriously. We have security personnel that is manning the door and navigating the parking lot, circling the parking lot during business hours and prior and after close. And largely in Tucson, I believe because of this heavily regulated nature of the industry, we've had little problems at any of the dispensaries. When the Harvest opened on Grant Road, there was an issue with parking and effect on the neighborhood there. We have ample parking to our north, and we plan to have that be well lit and well supervised by both video surveillance and personnel. I've spoken with Father Robert from across the street, and they have concern about operating hours on Sundays and other high holy days, Christmas Day, Christmas Eve. We are a state licensed medical facility, and if you were to come to our front door of our operations at 7 o'clock in the morning, any day of the week, you would see people lined up that can't sleep or that are in pain and that are there to access their medicine or their treatment. And the demographics have changed somewhat with the addition of the population in the beginning of 2021. But we're proud to be there and operate as responsibly as we can, distributing controlled substances under the program that was given to us by the voters a couple times. And the zoning of the site that we're proposing is within the guidelines of what city planners have asked us to operate in. And we want to be good neighbors with the church and everyone else in the neighborhood. Another concern that was raised is that it might bring traffic congestion. We've agreed to have right turn only out of our north parking lot. It's the larger of the parking lots, and we plan to utilize that heavily and have a corridor through the northern part of the building into the proposed dispensary location in the southern corner. The suite is nostalgic for me. It was a long time my grandfather's restaurant equipment operation. He ran Ford Restaurant Supply for many years in Tucson up until his retirement, when he spent a substantial amount of his liquid resources to renovate it into what was later a gym use. And that kind of ran its course over a couple decades. And now we're looking to reinvest in the property again on behalf of myself and the other owners, who are my sisters and my cousin and my aunt, and to be an asset to the neighborhood. We've had the property broken into several times. It hasn't generated any income for us in a number of years since the gym vacated in the middle of the night. And we're vested there. As I said, I'm a 6% owner of the building, and we want to be there long term. We're putting our operations there with an eye toward having it there for the next 30 years. And we want to be supportive of the church's operations next door. And we are well aware of their concerns about the drug addicted and homeless population that is beginning to come into the area. I'm well aware of those tail end issues of the opioid epidemic. My prior role prior to 2013 in operating the medical marijuana dispensary was as an administrator of a pain management and mental health clinic. And, you know, it's a large part of our motivation is trying to help some of those people. Marijuana can be a treatment to prevent them from relapse if they've gotten past their drug addictions to synthetic opioids and other very potent substances that are cheap and plentiful on the street these days. And we can also be an adjunct treatment in getting them through the acute process of withdrawal and reassimilating into our community. So I live here in Tucson. My kids were raised here in Tucson, and my grandbaby now is in Tucson and going to go to Tucson schools. And so we're vested in the community. I'm not a Wall Street corporation, planning and zoning, or the local police, or Father Robert has my phone number. And if there's issues with our operations, our personnel, or our customers, we ID everybody that comes through the door. We know who they are as soon as they're interacting with us. We surveil our property and do everything we can to be a solid part of the community and to help with these issues rather than bring detriment to them. Our small philanthropic contributions are focused on helping the homeless and having positive interactions with them. We collect small donations and I match them, and we go out and give grab bags to that population of, you know, things that we think they might need on a hot summer day. You know, what I would want is some water and a hat and a clean pair of socks. And so things like that, you know, toiletries go into the bags, and we do our small part, but it's a problem that is citywide and that is all of our responsibility to address and manage. I believe that's all I have. I'd be happy to take questions, and I believe Vince may have some things to say about the facilities particulars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Was there someone else in your group who wanted to speak?
Yes, this is Vince Catalano. I'm the architect for the project. Part of the project is also adjacent to the dispensary. We are doing a market with a bit of cafe. So we are adding a lot of activity to it. And I know that Ari's perspective on doing the market is to have healthy food available in this market to sell with fresh produce. And I think that's going to be a benefit to the neighborhood to have that market cafe on the north side of the building, which is really on the side where the neighborhood is. And on the south side is where the dispensary that's on Speedway. So I think going forward, it's going to be a nice project in that it's going to really revitalize that area with the market and cafe, which is something that would be a benefit to the community there. That is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone in the audience like to be heard on this case?
Yeah, I would like to, if you can recognize me.
Yes, I will, of course. Your name comes up as Camille. Please start with your full name and address. Thank you.
All right, my name is Camille Sitzman. I own the property at 5810 Bellevue Street. I don't want to minimize the medical need for medical marijuana. As a person who is diagnosed with multiple sensitivities in 2002 and multiple sclerosis in 2013, I understand the need for medication and treatment. However, I would like the examiner to recognize that marijuana is still federally illegal. The property that I own, the tenant that is currently in it, is actually in the healing industry. We'll leave it at that for purposes of privacy, but is definitely against having a dispensary this close to her home. In addition, one of the largest employers in town is Raytheon Missile Systems, and their employees, of which I am one also, are subject to random drug screening. So having a dispensary this close to a property actually limits the tenants that would be willing to rent from me. Now, I bought this property as my second investment property in my portfolio only maybe a year, or like the end of 2023. I believe it was October. So putting a dispensary this close to a tenant that I've only had in the property since then who is against it, and putting a dispensary this close to a property in a location in which one of the three biggest employers in Tucson is Raytheon, which requires clearances that you will lose if you go against federal laws. It's been made very clear to all of our employees that that's a no-go for your clearances and for your employment. You're actually impacting not only my property value because of the dispensary being there so close, but you're impacting my ability to rent to some of the largest, or people that work for one of the largest employers in the area. So I have some serious concerns with a federally illegal dispensary being so close to a property I own. To say it succinctly, I know it's a debatable space in the medical industry, and it's not my choice what other people choose for their pain management. And I recognize that marijuana could be one of the things that helps many people. And I recognize that there's a group out there that thinks that it's like the thing that works for them. But I do not want this type of establishment anywhere near a property I own. Like, just to be very clear. The traffic is obviously a concern. The fact that this property is right around the corner means that I would inevitably have to deal, like my tenants would have to deal with that traffic. They would have to deal with people parking on the street in front of their house. They would have to deal with people walking by, probably using the items, which if you're sitting in your backyard and exposed to the drug via secondhand smoke, please tell me that they would be clear on a random drug screening, right? You can see why people who are held to the requirements at the federal legal level would steer clear of renting from me. I just really do not want this dispensary in the backyard of a property I own. And I think that's about all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for giving me the floor. And I apologize for not being at the earlier hearings due to other conflicts.
It's quite all right. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this case?
Yes, please.
Yes, please go ahead, sir. Start with your name.
First name, yeah, this is Father Robert Rankin.
Welcome.
And 1212 North Saguaro Avenue, St. Melanie Byzantine Catholic Church. And so our church has been in the neighborhood since 1974. And it's been at the location we're at now, which is catty corner to the proposed site, since 1986. And it's called Harlan Heights because a former retired sheriff named Harlan band the neighborhood together to form a homeowners association, which met at St. Melanie's Church. And at that time, in the 70s and 80s, and even 90s, there was a high crime rate and a lot of vandalism. And Mr. Harlan brought together the community, a neighborhood watch program, and out of the church, we dissuaded the crime from that area. So I just wanted to let the community know that we've been there for a while, and we've been a positive part of that neighborhood. And we do different activities for the whole neighborhood, whether they're Catholic or not. So, and, our community has grown over the years. We have lots of young families, lots of children. They're all over the property all through the week. And we try to keep a good eye on them. We have a fence around the property. But I do worry about the smell of marijuana smoke drifting across the way. I worry about people straying onto the property. And as our community has grown, we're opening a second campus on Twin Peaks in Marana. And we're going to form an academy for a homeowners co-op in both locations, on the east side and the west side. I don't know how this is going to affect our ability to open a school or an academy on that property, as well as the property on Twin Peaks. So for all those reasons, I'm against the dispensary opening. I'm empathetic towards the vandalism and the eyesore that the empty building creates, but I think there's got to be a better solution for the neighborhood and for our church. And thank you, John, for listening.
Thank you, Father Robert. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard?
John, can I respond?
Yes, as soon as I've heard everyone who.
I was trying to unmute myself.
I'm sorry.
This is William Parvin. I was trying to unmute.
Oh, go, Mr. Parvin, go right ahead.
Yes, I spoke earlier about my concerns with the school. I want to add, I did some research about the applicant. I see it's Ari. I don't know if you'd like to refer by his last name. Sounds like he ran this problem earlier and had to move when a school was built and he wasn't permitted to expand. I just want to make it known. Even though I'm an attorney, I don't practice zoning law, so I'm not entirely up to date on what the zoning rules are. But it's my understanding is if we do want to create a school here, that we have priority. We were there first, so Ari would not be able to expand and he'd be asked to leave. Because I believe that's what happened last time in his situation where a school was opened after the fact and he was denied future expansions. But that's my objection, is that we were here first. Even though we haven't officially started the school yet, we were here first.
Thank you, Mr. Parvin. Would anyone else in opposition like to be heard?
Hello, I am a member of St. Melanie's Parish. My name is Mary Gilbert. And I don't want my grandchildren exposed to the marijuana smoke and just to be seeing intoxicated people. The neighborhood isn't that safe now. I've been at the church alone and there have been scary people there, and to get more people, especially if they're intoxicated, they're not going to be rational or reasonable people. I don't think that it's a safe thing to have them around a church, especially one that's going to have so many kids there. And that is my concern, and the health issues of having to smell the stink of other people's marijuana smoke. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Would anyone else in opposition like to be heard? Hearing no one, Mr. Rubin, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to address the issue of the smell of marijuana. Part of those heavy regulations that we operate under and the policies and procedures that we enforce are that of there being no consumption on site. That would include the parking lot. I don't want there to be any misconception about the cafe or the market. It's not intended to be a place to consume marijuana. We have a cannabis farm in Amato that's far too large to grow only one crop on it. And we've started to grow organic row crops and other vegetables and produce that we would sell at the market along with other specialty items. It's not an Amsterdam cafe where people will be smoking their products that they purchased at the dispensary. We do expect to deliver them quite an experience, and that they can come and they can buy their organic produce and have a coffee or a sandwich, and they can purchase their marijuana products or paraphernalia. We've arranged to have a couple of small retail suites in the south end in the entrance of the dispensary itself. And so we do expect to create a lively community there of clean, green thinking people that are looking for organic food as well as their organic cannabis products, but there will be no consumption allowed. One of our primary roles as a state licensed medical marijuana establishment and a state licensed recreational use establishment is that of education. And so we have a heavy focus on what does responsible use look like, what does DUI look like, and how to keep the public and yourself safe from any of those kind of legal issues. I'll reiterate that we've agreed to put right turn only out of our north parking lot, which is where the majority of our customers will park, because I want them to go through said market and cafe and see it and the colorful decorations and the organic shapes that we bring to things. And I want to deliver them an experience that they'll enjoy. We don't want that to interfere with the neighbors' enjoyment of their property. If there was a school that opened across the street that has a specific definition in the medical marijuana law, and we certainly wouldn't be permitted to open there if there was an operating school that met that definition at the present time. We did have a school come into the nursery property at our present location, and that location will, for the foreseeable future, not be able to be used as a marijuana establishment if we were to leave. It was an issue surrounding our application to expand. And the reason that we were able to operate in close proximity at that time is because we had been there first and they came in after. And so, you know, that's the story there. It's something that was out of my control. We always wanted to be at this Speedway location, and city ordinance didn't allow for it. And at some point a few years ago, city planners got together and they changed that ordinance, and that's the reason why we're here and we're making this application. It's not intended to disrupt anything that's going on with Father Robert's church or with the other people that live in the neighborhood. And if people are at the church and they're alone and somebody's creeping around, our security will be a phone call away and happy to come over. And they're more than capable gentlemen that will be happy to look after neighbors as much as they look after my staff and our products, which are sensitive and need to be handled in a particular way per the heavy regulation enacted by the health department in the state of Arizona and the city. And, you know, we want, as I said again, we want to be good neighbors. We want to be there for you and an asset to the community. And I thank everyone for their time.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing on case TP ENT 0124-00002, Desert Bloom Dispensary, East Speedway Boulevard. I want to thank everyone in attendance for their participation tonight. I want to wish everyone a safe and lovely evening. Good night, all.